Hello, everyone, and welcome to our District Administration Web Seminar here today, which is entitled Solving Your Teacher Shortage with Live Teaching. And all of this is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor that we have here today, Elevate K-12. Now, before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items, and then we'll get right started to the presentation. If at any time any of you need any technical support today, just please use the chat panel, and you can find that on the bottom right hand of your screen. And then just select my name, Stephen Blackburn, or host, and then type in your message, and I'll get to your question as quickly as I can. I'm also about to submit a phone number and access code in the chat, and you'll be able to dial in those numbers if you want to listen in privately, or if you don't have any speakers. So look out for that in your chat box. We will also be welcoming any questions that you have here today with a Q&A session, and that will be taking place at the end of the presentation. You can submit your questions at any time from now until the end by using the Q&A panel, and that, like the chat, is at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and then just send your questions to all panelists so we can answer them at the very end. If you currently don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, just again, look to the bottom right-hand side of your screen and then click on the expand triangle. Also, the last point I'd like to make, and then we'll get started, is that if you would like to access this webinar at a later time, you'll all be pleased to know that everyone who's registered and all of you who are in attendance here today, all of you will receive an email with a link to the slides as well as an archive recording. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers that we have with us today. We have Kim Kays, who is the Director of Academic Product at Elevate K-12. We also have Bridget Smith, and she is the Senior Strategic Growth Manager at Elevate K-12, and Amy Peterson, who is the VP of Academics at Elevate K-12. Well, welcome all of you for being here today. The floor, as they say, it is all yours. Thank you very much. Perfect. And you may now begin.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen, so much for that introduction and talking us through the technical piece. I believe my partner Kim's going to go through the slides for us today, and we would love to start engaging with you. So, team, I am Bridget Smith. I am a Strategic Growth Manager at Elevate K-12, and I have been, previous to this role, had the privilege of being in public education for 12 years, in where I served as a junior high science teacher, an assistant principal, and a principal for 4 years here in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a privilege to talk with you all today, and I would like for Amy to introduce herself next.
Hey, thanks, Bridget. I'm Amy Peterson. I head up the academics team here at Elevate K-12, and I have been in education for 25 years. And most of that time, I have been really focused on how to teach and learn effectively via technology. So that's what my research has been in, and much of my career. And I will share over to Kim.
Nice to meet you all. Very similarly to Bridget, I have nearly 20 years of experience in public education, first serving as a teacher and then an assistant principal and a principal, as well as a nonprofit partner, kind of executive coaching of school leaders to implement inclusive learning practices into their schools. And so it's great to be here today to talk to you about this really important topic.
And our fourth partners here, we have Carolyn with us, our Assistant Vice President of Instruction. She has lost her voice as all these viruses are bouncing around, so she'll be waving, monitoring the chat, and answering questions privately throughout the session. All right, so we are so excited to engage with you today in a topic that we are wildly passionate about, and how we can really begin to think differently about the teacher shortage crisis that we're focusing and looking at in the United States. In our session this morning, we are going to become and really confront the issues surrounding the teacher shortage in our country, and looking at how we can move past that reality into attracting highly effective and qualified teachers, looking at curriculum and technology accelerators, and even looking at how to staff strategically in order to increase leverage around our teaching force that we do have. So we'd love for you to take a moment, about 30 seconds in the polling on the right-hand side of your screen, to respond and share with us if you are currently facing a teacher shortage or an educator shortage at your school. So a quick yes or no, and that poll will close on the right-hand side of your screen. Awesome. Got some responses rolling in. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Thank you so much for those who were able to participate in that. As we start to look through those results, we are not surprised in the slightest to see that everybody who's responded is experiencing shortage within staffing to some degree. We've done and tried to be very intentional in looking at the statistics surrounding the national teacher shortage. You know, we see in the media consistently headlines surrounding this topic. And as we look at trends and patterns within our education workforce, we notice that there's not only a stark decline in the total number of certified K-12 teachers across our country, but that we're also seeing the open rate of vacant positions is accelerating. The most recent data has been collected by the National Education Association and projects that by 2024, we are going to face a shortage upwards of 2 million teachers in our K-12 space. From the same survey results, we also note and see that it's very clear that our teacher shortage is not affecting just one area or one age group of instruction, that we're seeing wide-ranging needs from our special education instructional needs through high school math and science, and even down into our middle school and elementary school age students and classrooms. So we know that there are a ton of different solutions, second poll for you, that schools are accessing. We'd love for you to take a moment for our second poll and our last one to respond and see if you are doing any of the following solutions at your campuses and within your districts. Note as well, there is an option for other solutions, and if you have an explanation, drop that in the chat so that we're able to know what your team's doing at your schools. And it's closing. Yeah, a lot of shifts towards our non-certified teachers and emergency certifications. Asynchronous work as well, and then we'll check the chat for that other option. Let's pop over here. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. So we've seen across all of the schools and districts that we're able to partner with that you all as district leaders and partners are working tirelessly to try and have a short-term solution to solve the vacancy reality. Many of these solutions, as listed, look at changes in expectations with certification or emergency certs or leveraging J-1 visa status in asynchronous platforms. Unfortunately, the reality behind this is that some of our interim solutions to teacher vacancies create unintended consequences because of the decisions that we're forced to make, whether that's due to lacking qualifications or experience and confidence. It takes time and it takes effort in order to work through these solutions, and they may have added negative impact, including decreased experiences for our students and increased teacher attrition rates. So the reality that we're now confronting is that despite tireless efforts and innovation at site levels and district levels, current solutions in the classroom are simply not going to solve the growing numbers of problems we're experiencing within our educator workforce. And this is my favorite slide in the deck to chat with you about because it's really critically time to think and act differently. And I love that because we're not asking to think and act and do more, which is often the experience that we see within our workspace, but to really dig into how can we approach and shift paradigm to think differently for our students. We're going to dive in next and talk deeply about the 4 pillars that we find most pivotal in working towards solving teacher shortage problems while still maintaining high quality experiences for our students. Our 4 pillars will range to discuss our quality teachers, our curriculum and learning technology, as well as the in-person support that is there to provide students what they need to access all of the learning opportunities there within. So we'll continue through with some of my partners sharing their expertise.
Great, thanks, Bridget. So I wanted to dig into that first pillar around quality teachers. And when we're looking at sort of minimum credentials for teachers, historically, we've really looked at a bachelor's in education and a teaching certification. But we recognize that the number of teachers walking through the doors with those credentials is shrinking, and that different states and districts have been trying out new models that look at alternatives to those minimum credentials. But I want to note that we as educators, we're rarely just looking at simply those minimum credentials. We're looking beyond that. And alternative models to solving the teacher shortage should look beyond those minimum credentials to give students a quality learning experience. So we're looking for in-classroom experience that gives us better confidence that these teachers can apply their skills effectively. We're looking at teachers who invest continuously in their craft through effective professional development. And I want to unpack that one a little bit more because this one becomes even more important as more districts and states look beyond traditional teaching credentialing to fill teacher shortages. Professional development that's focused on instructional practices rather than content knowledge is really important. That's the sort of most effective professional development. And making that professional development practical and customized to what and how teachers teach, and differentiating it for teachers as learners. Because as you think about it, your veteran teachers, your tech savvy teachers, and the teachers who came in with those alternative credentials, they all have very different needs. So keeping them motivated and engaged in their development includes offering differentiated professional development. I think another thing to consider in professional development is that it's not one and done. It should include follow-up meetings after the professional development and after coaching. Also, that professional development involves coaching as a key strategy. But obviously, there's a little bit of tension between all of those qualities of professional development that I mentioned and the realities at most schools, where there's often a lack of time and resources. In a recent survey, only about 15% of teachers receive ongoing professional development and coaching. And that obviously has a high relationship to how effective that professional development is going to be. So as we look at sort of bringing in this wider range of teachers and how prepared they are for the classroom and how they are evolving and developing in the classroom, that PD becomes even more important. Another thing I wanted to mention around professional development is really that what is the impact of the PD? Oftentimes we get so focused on selecting and preparing the PD that we forget to be measuring the impact of it, how it's changing the classrooms, like how are teachers changing their behaviors based on that PD? How is it affecting student outcomes? Oftentimes that measuring the impact falls by the wayside and needs to be at the forefront. A couple of other things I wanted to mention, actually on the previous slide. We're also looking at a couple of other things in teachers beyond those minimum credentials, and that's, can the teachers keep students engaged? So as kids' engagement sort of profiles change, we're also looking at how do we make sure that we have teachers who are keeping kids engaged, that kids are focused in their learning. And then how are those teachers building personal rapport with students? So when we're looking for all those kind of skills and abilities, we also want to be looking for teachers who are teaching the whole student and creating relationships with them. So looking beyond those minimum credentials to really find a well-rounded teacher who's going to create that positive learning experience. So I think with all of that, that's sort of our ideal. At the same time, we have teachers who are leaving the physical classroom because they don't feel valued for their skills and experience. Um, as I mentioned in the previous slide, as administrators, you aren't looking for just anyone, you're looking for skilled educators. But despite all of the other pressures districts are facing, we overlook that cultivating a culture that celebrates teachers is very important. So how do you cultivate that? It's about celebrating milestones and successes, both big and small. It's also about avoiding top-down, one-size-fits-all mandates to help support teacher autonomy. Um, and there's other pieces where we're looking at, as I mentioned before, professional development. How does that support teachers? As well as how are we looking at kind of controlling a lot of the things that fall into the teacher's schedule that take emotional energy away from their teaching, things like lunch duty, behavior management. We'll talk more about that in a couple of moments. But I wanted to mention a recent survey that really looked at what teachers found to be the big challenges in terms of helping students. And 68% of them cited that it was student disengagement. 57% noted student behavior as being a big obstacle to helping students. And then 27% mentioned insufficient support from administration. So there's a lot of, just as there are a lot of different factors that are going into the teacher shortage even occurring, there's a lot of factors going into teachers not feeling valued and leaving the classroom. Um, and those all need to be considered as we continue to think about how to solve this problem, that it needs to be holistic in its approach.
And we're going to dig into the second pillar of content and curriculum. So we know that a high quality teacher will do all they can with the resources they have, right? They're willing to go above and beyond. But we also know that when teachers have access to that high quality standards aligned curriculum, that students do grow faster. The data is really clear on that the right curriculum for your students can sometimes mean the difference between barely making half a year's growth to 1.5 to 2 years growth in a school year. And so the key is really finding the curriculum that is right for your school and your students. And then unpacking that and making sure you're addressing your state standards, your units, and making sure that teachers really understand the skills that they're trying to teach through that content and through that curriculum. Our mantra at our school when I was a principal was that the curriculum and the resources are just resources, right? The standards and the skills are what we're teaching to. And so making sure that teachers have access to varied and engaging resources at their fingertips and they know where they're at. So also at my school, right, we have this massive, beautiful library with lots of resources for teachers. And some of them didn't know where they were, how they could access them, or what to do with them. So making sure that the resources that you do invest in are meaningful, standards aligned, and that they're actually being utilized. So this also goes back a little bit to the PD and training and supporting teachers of making sure that when we hear all of these buzzwords about the new content and the curriculum that we're going to be purchasing, that teachers feel supported in using it and implementing it. One of the leading reasons why curriculum launches fail in schools is that teachers didn't know what to do with it. And so really making sure that they know what to do with it, that they know how to look into the standards and skills. A really, really important aspect of a high quality curriculum as well is having that built-in data and measurements and assessments so that teachers can have that at their fingertips. So they're not spending their time trying to create high quality assessments to measure what they're teaching, that it's really built into the curriculum. And then they have the tools to adjust their instruction and make sure they're doing what they need to do based on where the students are at. So what we've really found is that high quality assessment tools and curriculum paired together with teachers having that time and autonomy to dig into the student data really ensures that they know how to access the tools, can use the tools, and set goals for their students to really see growth. And so that curriculum, although often is a very boxed curriculum, you should definitely view it and think outside of the box and be a little bit flexible with that content and curriculum. And then our next pillar obviously is technology. It's not an optional add-on or bonus nice to have in schools anymore. We saw that pivot definitely in these last few years of schools that were not one-to-one device schools suddenly had to pivot to be one-to-one device schools, and now are trying to find meaningful ways to use that technology in their classrooms. Similarly to curriculum, we know that just purchasing something that's highly rated and high quality isn't enough, right? You have to support teachers in providing professional development and training and observations and practice into how to use that technology in a meaningful way. Smart boards in every classroom are great, but unless teachers are using it to truly engage students in a meaningful way, they're not going to make an impact on learning. And ways that we have found through research and our own experience that technology can be super engaging is as a communication tool, right? Students now are used to communicating via text, via chat, via short videos and links. And so that is really one huge way that schools can leverage technology in their classroom, different ways to respond to work, to show what they know using technology. And we've also seen that a huge way that schools can leverage technology is through data. So leveraging technology to have in the moment access to where students are and what they're learning and how well they're accessing that content can be super valuable to teachers. They'll know right then that they need to pivot without having to give a handwritten exit ticket and pass it out and pass it back in and look through them, right? Teachers can use technology to be a lot more efficient in their classrooms, and it's been shown to greatly accelerate the amount that students can learn in any given lesson, and then that builds throughout the units. So we want to really make sure that schools are leveraging that, choosing the right technology that's for them, not overwhelming teachers with lots of technology. And then a really huge one is making sure that that technology is accessible to all students. So something that we found is that nearly 29% of schools are not able to fully support their special education students in a tier 1 general education setting. And we know that technology can really help support that. There are lots of great technology that you can leverage to make sure students are getting accommodations in real time in their classrooms and just really have accessibility. And so for those 30% of schools out there who are struggling to do that, technology can be a really easy way to leverage that and ensure that there's equitable access to what students are learning across the board. And we've already definitely touched on the professional development aspect, but I highly encourage folks to, when you're implementing any kind of technology, ensure that all of your teachers understand it and are on board with it and have time to practice and deliver it to hone those skills.
So the fourth pillar, support staff. So any approaches to addressing the teacher shortage should look beyond the classroom teacher as the sole provider of the positive learning environment. So I think that's one of the challenges is that with the constraints going on in districts today is a lot of it falls on the teacher. So what kind of options are there to help support that teacher and not necessarily focus all of the responsibility on that one individual. So consider who in your school knows your kids to provide this sort of school-wide culture of a supportive learning environment. Is it the RTI specialist? Is it the football coach? Bridge and make that connection with your teachers and build that culture that leverages the entire school community, and that can provide some flexibility to your teachers. Also, the in-class support of paraprofessionals can reinforce learning, it can support differentiation, and it can help with classroom management, which we all know has become a little bit more challenging due to worsening student behavior since the pandemic. One of the challenges with paraprofessionals is that more than 60% of them say they have received 10 hours or less of PD in the last year. And so supporting teachers with trained paraprofessionals can help alleviate some of the unique challenges that teachers are facing in today's classroom. I know we've introduced a lot of different thoughts on how to support your students and teachers in this era of significant teacher shortage, and we recognize that no district can implement all of these ideas. There are naturally different opportunities and constraints within different districts that make some of these ideas easier or more difficult to implement. Also, your district may have already implemented some of these ideas. We would love to hear how some of them have worked for you, and we hope that we may have given you some additional ideas to consider for your district.
On that, we want to also touch and move into one of the solutions that we feel most compelled to use. Go ahead, Kim, in order to support students and to think differently, which is live teaching. Before I talk about how the 4 pillars discussed by Amy and Kim also relate to a live teaching model, I want to encourage you to use the chat for either questions that you have that you've heard already, or questions that you have based on what I'm about to share, and or to Amy's point, things that you're doing at your schools that are proving to be effective and benefiting students, so that we can continue our collaboration as we start to move through the rest of our session today. Live teaching is our passion, and live teaching is what we as educators are dedicating our work to day in and day out. Let's dive right in. The very first component to and aligned to pillar 1 with teaching of a highly effective live teaching model and of our instructional framework is bringing a certified teacher directly to students, live, synchronous, and in real time. In the Elevate classroom, like you see on the screen, our certified teacher enters the class period via live stream prominently in projection at the front of a classroom. We're really proud to share and acknowledge that our teachers are fully certified and based within the United States. Many of our teachers have wild experience, years of experience under their tenure, averaging over 13 years. And this brings knowledge of best practice and pedagogy and content expertise directly to students, directly in the instructional period. With this partnership with our live teachers, we are able to prioritize strategic, ongoing professional development for each of our instructors in order to guarantee that their growth also continues to highly impact student learning and student evidence of learning through our Coaching for All model. Our teachers are high energy. They're emphasizing student engagement, both with two-way communication and in other formats we'll show you here in a little bit. And we are consistently rooting ourselves in curriculum and methodology throughout our live instruction periods. And that leads me beautifully to talk about the second pillar, not only from what was shared earlier from our research and years of experimentation, but also from what we do day to day, which is the impactful curriculum. For our students, we know that it is critical to remain foundationally focused on our standards. However, we also have a flexible curriculum toolbox with a wide array of resources to guarantee that we're adapting our instruction to meet the needs of the students within the classroom, which is a direct mirror to the traditional classroom when the teacher may be in person. And we're very proud of what that looks like in execution. We're able, with our impactful curriculum, to guarantee curriculum instruction and assessment alignment and make sure that we're able, with that adaptability, to differentiate and meet the needs of students where they're at or extend in order to provide students the enrichment they deserve within that Tier 1 instructional period. Technology, as Kim was just sharing, is the third pillar of our instructional framework, and it's paramount in order to deliver high quality instruction live to your students. In an Elevate classroom, students interact with technology in a variety of ways. They interact directly with their live teacher with two-way communication. Microphones and speakers enable that verbal communication strategy, and chat functions and response systems allow for both private and public technology responses. Students also engage through their one-to-one device and our Elevate K-12 portal, which is a unique platform because we've designed it specifically for K-12 education, as opposed to some other technology platforms which may be used more for adult learning or in the business space. The Elevate portal is catered to student learning needs and student developmental needs as well. Looking last at the fourth pillar, one of the most critical components, I've said that about all four pillars because they're all critical, looking at our in-person support. So our in-person support model is the classroom coach who you see in cartoon version on the screen, and is the direct co-facilitator and partner to our Elevate teacher. The in-person classroom coach builds upon foundations of routine and consistency for students, relationship building and emotional well-being, and then instructional partnership for effective lesson execution. We see in our most highly profound classrooms that the relationship between the Elevate teacher and that in-person support, the more consistent and intentional that relationship is and that communication becomes, the more impactful our student learning is, which is ultimately why each of us exist each day, to continue this passion. As a quick note too for our classroom coach, as Elevate K-12 partners, we provide ongoing training to that classroom coach, initial and ongoing throughout the program, to help amplify the success of the teaching and learning that takes place within the classroom space, and to guarantee again that that coaching model extends to all educators touching our students, regardless of title or position that exists. If you can't tell, I love to talk about the live stream model. We really aim to make sure each class in every district has access to qualified teachers, despite the challenges we're facing in our education landscape and despite the projections for future challenges that are going to exist with staffing, with high quality educators being in one geographic location. And so we work to expand that and give access to all students, regardless of where they're living, the high quality teaching experience. We would love to transition into an opportunity for you to engage, and some of you have already started this, which is so exciting, and share questions that we can answer as a panel for you, either on the research and background content or on the physical side, product side that we have available. So I'm going to pivot my role into looking at the questions in the Q&A and delegating that out to different teammates on our panel. The first one I'm going to answer very briefly for you, which is great, and this comes from one of our attendees, Wanda. The question says, what is meant by US certified? So our teachers, as we are going through the application process and into the interview process, are applying to work with our team as any other job would exist. They are certified within the state that they live in with here in our country. We will talk and have conversations around the further certification needs if the school or district needs more specificity in that. But our team and our pipeline is fully certified. Okay. All right. The next question that I'm going to bring to Amy and Kim, you guys can share, is how do you know your teachers are fully trained in the specific curriculum that we're using?
That's a great question. So Elevate uses its own curriculum. It's designed to national standards, but it is aligned to specific state standards. So we are basically developing classes that have lessons and units that are designed as packages, as we kind of described in the practices earlier in the presentation, so that we ensure that we're meeting the outcomes that match those state standards. And for those of you that have end of course assessments that are state assessments, we're making sure that they're aligned to those as well. So our teachers are trained in the Elevate curriculum, and that curriculum is state aligned. I'll actually go one further. We also, our academic coaching for teachers is actually done in a subject specific areas. So we have a specific coaching team that is focused on math teachers, a specific one for science teachers, and so on, because we recognize the differences in pedagogy for subject areas, and we want to make sure that our teachers are really proficient at teaching through technology in that particular subject area.
Absolutely. Amy, I'm going to add one more point about that as well, is that in our process and partnerships with districts across the country, we are able to also look at the pacing and the long-term plans of each course a school or district is providing for their students and compare and contrast to the courses that we have designed. We're able to shift our units of instruction to match the pacing guide of the different of the district's plan itself. And so those are deep conversations that we guarantee we dig into with our partners across the country. All right, looking at another question, I am going to ask Kim to go ahead and share this one. Can Elevate teachers support diverse learners and complete IEPs?
Yeah, so there's a few ways that Elevate supports our diverse learners. So in our Tier 1 courses, there are lots of ways that teachers and classroom coaches can work together to support students with IEPs, especially within our accessibility features. And then we actually do have a standalone special education product that does provide services to schools that would support more deeply into the students' IEPs and what they're learning, building those foundational skills. And we, in addition to that, I would say that the data that is collected through our portal and through our teacher notes can also be shared with schools for informing IEPs during meetings and through the case managers. And so there's lots of back and forth communication and lots of data that we share that can be collaborated on to make sure that we are supporting students with IEPs as fully as possible. And there are some nuances in different products that we can provide depending on the makeup of your student and what their needs are.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. I have a few questions that are similar around that classroom coach in-person support. The question first, and if Amy and Kim all answer this one, but please feel free to chime in. The question says, how does this model for learning work with the licensing requirements for there to be a certified teacher in the classroom for supervision of students? Would having a paraprofessional be present in the room be acceptable in lieu of having the certified teacher? And so knowing this is two parts, I want to make sure I hit everything there. First and foremost, we have been able to partner with our districts that the Elevate teacher is in fact and can be the teacher of record for instructional minutes provided by a certified instructor. So that in-person support classroom coach is not required to be a highly qualified instructor, but that person can be a variety of different positions based on the needs or the current employees within the school district. A paraprofessional or educational assistant is most definitely a viable option for that classroom coach. But we've also seen many districts choose and select if long-term substitutes are one of your current solutions to keep the long-term substitute in place for consistency and relationships with the students, but stream the instruction in with a live stream instructor to guarantee the certification and content expertise. We've seen this expand as well into partnerships with student teachers and a variety of models. So that continued conversation can actually drill down more specifically between our team and a school team to look at what is available and what then makes the most sense for that campus. So let me look at some of the next questions. We got a question earlier briefly, and I'm not sure if it would be Amy or Kim. Either please jump in about what are some of the technology best practices from both research but also within our products that support all students in accessing high quality viable curriculum.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was going to say I can kick us off and then I'll pass it off to Amy. So I think the biggest way to leverage technology is through engagement. And so I kind of mentioned this on my slide is that students are used to engaging with each other and with adults in a much different way than we are as adults. And so we often see that where we're finding the biggest impact is that ability to engage with content, each other and their teachers in a different way. And so what our platform is built in and what other schools are seeing success with is that ability to show what you know, right? So if it's in a chat, if it's verbally, if it's by submitting a video, it's offering these options and choices for students to engage differently and in the manner that is best for them. And so I think it's being a lot more flexible than a traditional kind of learning model with a student and a teacher one-on-one in a classroom, where you're doing a written response or a verbal response. Technology can be leveraged to make sure that students are participating and engaging in a way that's kind of what they're used to and the best way that they interact with folks. That would be one of the ways that we've seen it really successful in our product.
Yeah, I would also say, a lot of the research looks at technology as a tool versus the outcome or to ensure the outcome. So, and when I say it's a tool, what I really mean by that is you can use it in a lot of different ways. Just like you can use a hammer to put a nail into the wall, you can also use that same hammer to get the nail out of the wall. And so, making sure that teachers know how to use the quote hammer in the way that's going to result in the type of learning results you're looking for is really critically important. So you can't just necessarily put technology in the classroom and expect to have predictable outcomes come from it. And so I think that's why, part of what you've seen threaded towards throughout our earlier piece of this conversation is really how important it is that people know how to use those tools effectively, because just using the tool does not ensure its effectiveness.
Thank you guys so much. The next question, we're going to go back to Kim, and then I'm going to touch on unions and implementation. So stay tuned for that. Kim, in the case of looking at our Elevate resource classroom and talking about that instructor, who is the case manager for the caseload? Is it someone within the school team, our team? Can you share a little more on that?
Yeah, we really view our resource classroom as a partnership. So there's a lot more added resources that we offer in addition to the Tier 1 course. So we have our state certified special education teacher who's offering that high quality instruction. Then we also have a person called an inclusive learning coordinator who really serves as that liaison between Elevate and the school personnel to make sure that all the data is there, that you're observing the classroom, they're auditing to make sure the accommodations and modifications are happening and progress monitoring some of the data. And then we do partner with the school-based case manager. So we know that this is also a pain point for schools, right? Sometimes the one special education teacher is also serving as the case manager. And so what is really unique about this is that we can take that off of their plate, right? So that the case manager can focus on those case managing duties and we can focus on providing those instructional minutes that are outlined in the IEP. And so while we don't enter into any of the district systems and write IEPs or write IEP goals, we have a super collaborative working environment where we're giving all the data and feedback, anecdotal data, student growth data, performance data to that case manager, making sure that that person, whoever the school has identified, has all the information they need to support those students in writing the IEPs. The resource room product is actually quite flexible in that way, and that sometimes that can be an assistant principal, sometimes it's a district student services coordinator, anyone who can really speak to the students and has that special education background and knowledge can partner with us so that we can provide that support for special education students.
Thank you so much, Kim. We have a theme of questions because I know we're speaking to a room of administrators who jump to logistics, as does my brain. So we're going to touch quickly on implementation, cost, and unions. So I'm going to actually work backwards. We have active partnerships in several states and in several districts who have active teacher unions. And so having unions is not a barrier to partnership with our model, but I don't know that I can answer that globally because the needs and expectations of every union vary widely. My best recommendation is instead, let's have a follow-up conversation specific to your state and your district to look at what the expectations of the unions are. I will say that we're currently launching a partnership who has a very tight-knit, very strong advocate teacher association here in Phoenix because we're not a union state, but our associations are really powerful in advocacy of campuses. And we've brought our association reps on board to the conversation, dialogue, and planning process from step one in order to have transparency, honesty, and look for any concerns that they may have. The best piece is that the union also wants what's best for students in teaching and learning and are often willing to have said conversations. So transitioning into looking at implementation and cost. Implementation is going to have a range of approximately 2 weeks to 4 weeks to implement. So I have several recommendations that come with this idea. Is the idea of first, let's look and see what our school needs are. And second, let's look and see what the highest area of need is for kids. So not just all needs at once, but highest need and or area that we feel live teaching is going to be most effective for our students. Let's look at a pilot. And the reason that I always suggest that is because then instead of being reactive at certain marker points within the year, right before school starts, quarter breaks or semester breaks, you're going to get a very great experience that shows you how this modality works, how this serves students, and how it can be used at scale for a larger number of program needs. That also then means if you have a last minute teacher resignation, which was the specific question in the chat, you already have background knowledge and context for what live stream looks like in order to then pivot and meet the need of an unplanned resignation that comes through. We support you with all of that process and any needs that the district may have as well with board conversations. And we'd love to be that really strategic partner along the whole process. Our cost structure is going to be managed per period of instruction. And again, that does become a bit of a targeted conversation with schools and districts based on the number of periods you may need for a certified instructor, as well as the length of period. So please have follow-up dialogue with our team so that we can really cater all of our conversations directly to you and support your students. One of the next questions, and please jump in, Kim or Amy, is around the idea of student data and how do we know if students are progressing or not as they engage in learning via live stream?
Sure. So we have a number of assessment points. So at a very high level, we do a beginning of the year, mid-year, and end of year benchmark. So we're looking kind of at that macro level view. As we get deeper into it, we do have end of unit assessments for every unit. And then each week we have at least 2 formative assessments that are helping us gauge how students are progressing towards the outcomes of that particular unit. In addition to that, so I've given you the high level, the mid level, the documented kind of micro level. In addition to that, we also have teachers will do sort of lesson level QZs. So every day, every lesson, we have something called a QZ, which allows the teacher to see how students are progressing in terms of understanding the particular topic of that lesson. And that's a check for understanding to allow the teacher to know is there something that they need to reteach? Should they fast forward? So it lets them really kind of modulate how they're moving forward with that lesson. So it's a number of different touch points.
And Amy, I really appreciate you sharing all of the variety of both summative and formative assessments. Again, really capturing the idea that a live classroom is going to mirror a traditional classroom in most all ways and still has that capacity to support our students. Okay. I noticed that our questions are starting to slow, and I want to invite you, if there are any still burning, to drop those in there as well. And we'll also, if anything comes up as we're starting to wrap, respond to any privately after the webinar concludes today as well. Just a quick moment. I want to thank you all so very much for joining us today. It is both an honor and a privilege to talk to a room of other leaders passionate about education as we are really serving our students given the challenges that exist day in and day out. And we wish you nothing but success, but more importantly, a happy and healthy winter break as you are starting to transition into some time away from your campuses. So thank you so very much. Please be well, and we look forward to our future conversations.
Perfect. And actually, before I go through my outro, I did get one question in privately. I just wanted to throw that out there. So this person just asked, do you have a pricing sheet available?
We do. We are very forward with our pricing and have no concerns with that. If you can give Stephen, well, Stephen can provide me with your information and I can reach out after our session.
All right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, and also too, as I go through my closing slides in just a few moments, please feel free to continue submitting your questions, and I'll make sure that our team at DA, we will, send all those questions over to Elevate K-12 so that they can be answered at some point. But before that, I just want to thank you again, Kim, Bridget, Amy, and Carolyn as well for your time here today. And of course, thank you to Elevate K-12. And I'd also like just to thank you, our audience, for joining us here today as well. For those of you who enjoyed what you saw here, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by us here at District Administration, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, as well as current issues in K through 12. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for free to us at DA, and they stay to date with us in our print magazine, online, in our newsletters, as well as web seminars like this one. Also, if you would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe that what you saw here would be helpful to your colleagues, and I'm sure that is very much the case, you'll be pleased to know that our team at DA, we will be sending you an email at some point later tomorrow, and in that email, it'll include an on-demand recording of this web seminar as well as the link to the slides, so look out for that. So with that, on behalf of DA, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay safe, and have a great holiday season, everyone. Thank you.